All right, so thank you for submitting your video. You were one of the first to post a video on there, and I know it's a little terrifying posting your own swing online, so kudos to you for just throwing it out there. You mentioned you hit it kind of short, 230, and you slice 50% of the time. You're a high handicap golfer, 20-ish handicap. That kind of goes hand in hand. You slice it, you hit it out of bounds, a lot of penalty shots, whatever it might be, but it's a lot of that stemming from probably the tee shots. I think the number one thing to do is let's just compare you to someone else first and then figure out what the fixes are to create maybe a better swing or even just better setup to maybe create better shot shapes as opposed to the 50% slice that you might have. So you might recognize the guy on the left, Rory McIlroy, and you on the right-hand side. The most glaring difference is at setup, where your setup is really, I don't want to say lazy, but it's very rigid. Rory McIlroy has a very specific setup for a very specific reason. He's got some bend in his knees. You have very little at this point. He's got a lot of bend from the hips, and you don't have a lot of that at all. So, golf is played on a tilted axis where the ball is on the ground. If this was baseball, the ball would be coming in about waist height. You wouldn't really need to have too much of a tilted angle to your back, but we really need it for this sport. So we're going to go ahead and adjust some of your setup positions. First thing you're going to do is we're going to clear these lines up, and we're going to stick a little bit of flex in your knees. So your knees will look a little bit more like Rory's here, followed by bending directly at the hips. So it's going to feel like your rear end sticks outwards a little bit, kind of in that direction. And what that's going to do, it's going to allow your arms to hang more down in front of you. Rory's got his arms a little more out in front, which is fine. They can be anywhere from, straight down. They can be a little bit in, but not, not excessively. And you don't need to be Jim Furyk, but I also don't want to see them excessively outward. Your posture just needs to be adjusted, and that's, first priority. Second, let's zoom in on these arms. You are setting yourself up to hit a slice. So if you look, the blue dots on Rory's right arm are kind of covering all the, the red dots, if you will. So if anything, this arm, the trail arm, is slightly more behind the lead arm. So you can actually get a view, a little bit of the lead arm on this side of the video, whereas yours, your shoulders are somewhat open, and you can actually see, if we zoom in a little bit more, I actually get to see your left forearm underneath your right forearm. So you have literally set yourself up to swing on a path that's going to make the club travel more across the golf ball. With that slightly new setup that we have for you, with more bend in the hips and more bend in the knees and the arms a little more hanging down, I would love for you to take your right shoulder and just drop it slightly backwards and let that right arm bend and fold a little bit, so your arm will look a little bit more like this, and your lead arm will feel like it's a little more out in front, so you get a little bit of a triangle. Rory's arms are both very, very straight. We don't need to be exactly like that, but I think if you can get that right elbow a little more down and the left arm a little longer and more visible from this angle, you would find yourself some, better shots with the club path moving a little more into out or rightward. Now, once you go ahead and make those changes, it's going to be, a much different looking golf swing when you actually do go ahead and swing the club. But let's just go ahead and look at it, as is, and just see what we can do a little bit better. So the first thing I would say is at address, when you get those arms a little more rigid and a little more long, I would like you to kind of hang onto that golf club, squeeze it a little bit, so maybe you're a little firmer on the grip. And I want to make sure your arms feel a little more rigid. So you have very soft arms. Generally, people have soft arms will have very long back swings where the arms get a little bit separated at the top, and the club will get a little bit past parallel in a bad way because there's very little structure up there at the top. Things you look like you do well from this angle, it appears your grip is actually pretty solid. Like, it doesn't look like the club face and the left-hand grip are in too crazy of a position at that point. And then a variety of other things just based on posture alone is when you make your backswing, you start very upright, and then you have to create some sort of tilted angle here with your shoulders. So, you have to adjust your posture to adjust for the fact that you didn't actually start with any forward bend in the hips. On the contrary, Rory on the left-hand side has really rigid arms as he takes the club back, very, very long, rigid. Right arm stays longer for a longer period of time than yours. And he gets all the way up to P4, or the top of the backswing here, and there's a lot of structure there. Similar looking, but his left arm is a lot more straight, a lot more rigid. Yours is very loose, and the wrists get very loose at the top due to the lack of rigidity in your left arm. Moving a little bit more forward, let's take a look at what Rory does on the way down. And as he makes the downswing, what you're going to notice is as he moves down, his hands or his hand path will move more downward initially, then it moves outward. So what that's going to do, it's going to help him shallow the shaft a little bit. I'm sure that's a pretty, a term that you've heard before, where the club is a little more shallow or a little more from the inside. What you're going to see is as we take yours down, your hand path is going to move more outward. So it's going to move more in this direction than this direction. We're going to keep it really simple and just use those terms, this direction, that direction. So it's moving more outward. And a good telltale sign of like where you are at certain positions would be at about here. Let's take these lines off. Where is the shaft of that golf club intersecting? Is it intersecting your forearm, bicep, shoulder blade, shoulder? Yours is where? It is somewhere just above your bicep at that point. Let's take a look at Rory's. And when we get to the same exact position, you're going to notice a very different placement of his arms versus yours. So he's got more bend, more angle to him, if you will. His shaft is a little more in line with his trail forearm, where yours is a lot more up in the air and steep. So when you have a position like you do, where the club is intersecting your bicep or your forearm, there's going to be some compensations that need to be made to hit the golf ball. Other things you're going to notice, club face. Your club face is very, very open at this point. Rory's is actually much more shut, and you can kind of compare those angles. The next couple frames will be more telling. So his club face continues to point more downwards, whereas if I were to have more frames in this video, yours would point more upwards for a longer period of time. And finally, as we continue down, what you're going to see is Rory's golf club will approach the golf ball coming into out, or from the inside in this direction going out. Rory swings really high up on the golf ball, and he also has a fairly large path number, especially with the driver. But he's a great example of what it should look like when you have an into out swing path. So there you go. There's your left arm a little bit on top of the right, and there's his trail arm at a slight bend there. So you can see left arm is higher than the right arm. So when we take your swing and take a peek at it, you're going to notice the club face at this point here is wide open. So we're like one frame from impact, and that thing is pointed directly right, as rightward as you can possibly make it. As you make your way through the golf swing a little bit further, one more frame, you can see that you've hit the heel of the golf club and you've rotated the face dead shut. Now, you didn't purposely do that. What happened is the ball hit the heel of the club and it shut the face down, and it created a lot of gear effect. So the face will kind of appear that it shuts down and rolls over, and then the ball will basically move hard right. And as you continue to move through the golf ball, you continue to get as vertical as possible. This is just a compensation from you being over the top. It's more of a defense mechanism. Your arms are going to bend, they're going to fold. But that is the issue. So you've got a club face that's way too open. You've got a swing path that is way too across the golf ball, out to in, and you've got some really goofy posture at address. The posture needs to be addressed first. You need to change all that initially, and then see what the swing actually does. There's a lot of times where I'm teaching golf where the posture and the setup is just so poor that when you adjust it, you actually get a swing path that's more into out. Now, do I think that's going to wildly change the club face at impact? Probably not. It would be great if it did, but I would have to see it from more of a face-on view, and the face-on view being more of if I was standing on that side of the golf ball looking at that view, just to see where your hands are on the golf club. I'm going to suspect that they're probably in a slightly weak position, and that's probably creating a little bit more of an open face for you at impact. So here's the $1,000,000 question. Like, what do you do to fix this? So without me jumping on the camera, but like what I would say is I would take your golf club in the same position, and if I can doodle on this for a minute, I would keep your left hand where it is. I'd probably strengthen the grip a little bit, maybe see like 2 knuckles, and then I would take this trail hand, the bottom hand, and I would take it, I'd slide it way down here onto the shaft. So your hand is kind of really, really split on the club. You're going to kind of see it there. You're going to feel like you're Happy Gilmore, a hockey player. It's going to feel like a slap shot. I would get into your good posture. You don't have to get the club onto the ground. You can hover the club off the ground. I would practice making some like big, large, what feel like slap shot swings, and making sure the arms are really rigid. You're going to find that this swing is going to produce something that's a lot more around you, and it's going to look a little bit more like this. It's probably going to get a little deeper up. I'm not drawing stuff there. Let's try that again. So it's going to get a little more in and around, And then what I would do is I would continue to hold the club like that and bring the club all the way back down to this position here that Rory gets into. So your hands would be split at this point. The club head is somewhere in this position. And I would practice just getting back and pumping it back down to the, the club back to parallel. Get it back up, club back to parallel. You should be practicing keeping your chest pointed more at the camera or more shut, if you will. You like to rotate yourself really open really quickly and stand up. So you'd like to go kind of in this direction where Rory's staying more shut, like his, left shoulder's over here. What you're going to find is when you actually make your swings, you're going to typically rotate open and stand up. So I want you to make some pumps and almost feel like your chest or the buttons on your shirt actually still point back behind the golf ball. That'll keep you more shut. That'll get you more into out. And hopefully that little bit of a grip change will get you to be a little more of a drawer of the golf ball instead of a push, slice, heel shot type of golfer. And maybe you'll go from a 20 down to an 18. Who knows? But like that, hopefully that's a good analysis of what you've got going on there.